It is 6:07 PM on April 30th, 2025. Good evening. This is the meeting of the Whately Planning Board. So that's our call to order. We are going to first order. That's good. Somebody's quacking.
Oh, no, I didn't realize Lauren had gotten there.
Yeah, Laura's here now. So we have all 5 members. There's no one else present in the room, and I don't see anyone else on Zoom. So the first item of business, I think is going to take, let's try to maybe limit this to about 45 minutes. I think, so I'm going to preface this with, I've been in touch with the Zoning Board of Appeals. They have a draft of the same bylaw. They're meeting on May 1st, and they're going to have their own discussion about it. So they can form have their own questions without us. Then we have an agreement that both boards will have a joint meeting, not a public hearing, just a joint public meeting, which would be at our next meeting date. And so maybe as sort of part of this topic, this might be a good time to just talk about our next meeting date, because our typical meeting date would then be May 28th, but of course, this is also when the select board is meeting. And so I wonder how you all would feel about moving our meeting back a week to the Wednesday, the 21st of May.
Yeah, I don't think that's
I'm good.
It's a horrendous day for you.
I got dad's having surgery. I have an astronomically huge exam that I haven't told anybody about.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So
no, I'm not gonna stress about that yet. The 21st is a poof.
Okay, so the 21st is a bad day. I mean, unless, whenever possible, I don't want to exclude a member of the board. I can still do, it just means that on the 28th,
Bring Mike in.
we'll be in the same situation where the select board will be meeting there.
Sure. Or, I mean, I'm fine with meeting in this space, or I was gonna say, does it have to be a Wednesday?
It
We can just do a different.
We used to be on
Day, I
Tuesdays,
do.
which was fun because the auction was always going.
Yes.
So lovely serenade.
I'm sure.
So it's certainly the case. So I'm looking at in May. I'm flying home on Tuesday night from Florida, so that won't work. But it could, for example, be Thursday, the 22nd.
I'm pretty flexible.
You're pretty flexible in May.
I can do that.
So we could do our next, or couldn't do Monday either because I don't know.
So that's also Memorial Day.
No, I can't do Monday.
May?
The 26th.
Sorry, wrong week.
Yeah.
The 26th is Memorial Day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not gonna do that. So,
And generally speaking, I cannot do Mondays.
yeah, that's fine. Just out of curiosity, how do people feel about Thursday, the 29th?
I would be fine with that.
I'm open.
You're open?
Yep.
You, Sarah? Okay. So why don't we tentatively agree that we'll move the May meeting from the 28th Wednesday to the 29th Thursday? And it's not necessarily the case that the entire ZBA needs to meet with us, and they're gonna, whatever they do, they'll come in via Zoom versus in person.
Are we gonna do 6 or 5:30?
5:30. We'll do 5:30. All right, I'm good with it starting to be consistent on a 5:30 meeting start. Today was unusual because of the special.
Sarah, is that your last meeting?
Technically, no.
Yeah.
We would like to meet in June. And so Mike I spoke to Mike, we'll get back to that, but I said, we'll talk about him, blah, blah, blah. And then, assuming all goes well, the appointment on what happens, that you could be invited to our next meeting in May. Yep, so you could be in, so 2 months overlap and. Okay. All right.
Yeah, because I'm buying pizza.
Okay.
We're
So
gonna send her off with a flash.
No big deals.
All right, so we're getting a little out of order, so we'll get back to our first order of business, discuss the draft zoning bylaw on battery energy storage systems. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share this on my screen. Now, what I'm gonna propose we do is go through this pretty carefully, line by line, section by section, and note any questions or concerns. I will say that this is not, we shouldn't consider this bylaw in quote unquote final form. We get to decide what final form is, and there are definitely things that were left over to us to decide by the Energy Storage Study Committee, all right? And we don't do a public hearing on a bylaw until we believe it's in final form. Because if it goes under those major changes, we would have to do another public hearing. Right? So we're with the plan and the process. Okay, you've all had a chance, I hope, to look it over. And yeah, so there's first these we would be introducing under light industrial uses two new uses, and the intuition is that there's a tier 1 and a tier 2. We'll see the definitions a little bit later, but right now I'm just focusing on what would go into the table of use. So the intuition that tier 1 storage systems are supposed to be generally smaller in both capacity, energy storage capacity, and also in physical footprint on the ground, which the combination of those two factors is understood by the storage committee to be correlated with risk. Smaller systems, less risk of fire, damage, that sort of thing. And then tier 2 are the bigger systems, all right? So the recommendation coming over to us was that these smaller systems, that we still want to keep them out of the AR1 zone. So keep them away from people and housing, but they could be in the AR2 zone, set back at least 400 feet from the road, and then with additional setbacks, and always by special. So there's no place where these systems will be allowed as of right. Everything would require special permit review by the zoning board of appeals. Any questions, concerns about this layout of the table of use? Smaller systems allowed and disallowed only in AR1. The bigger systems disallowed in AR1, AR2, and commercial, because commercial, as you remember, is mixed, residential and commercial, but allowed in commercial, industrial, and industrial, which is a relatively small area. This doesn't have to be your, final chance to have questions, but we'll just sort of go through it, and if anything is jumping out at you or you came into the nice meeting, this is a chance to get that on the record.
I do have, I don't know, a potential concern, I guess.
Okay, go.
So obviously fire is a concern.
Yes.
with this. So AR2, a lot of the AR2 areas of town do not have access to a fire hydrant.
Right.
If there's a fire, I'm sure these companies obviously are gonna have, it's gonna have to be accessible for fire trucks and whatever. I assume they're gonna have some kind of suppression system,
Right.
but it's gonna all rely on well water, which I don't know, is kind of a concern for me. The well water at my house tastes great, but the water pressure sucks. So is there gonna be adequate water? Do they discover that after they've already invested money into this? And then they're kind of screwed and they want to push forward and we're fighting that. So that's a concern I would have. And then, you know, if the fire department has to bring water up there, that's a nightmare. And they're pumping it from someplace else. They're gonna have to use town resources from someplace else because we don't have enough guys on our fire department. We have one
Right,
pump truck that can
Or the river.
bring water, yeah, or, but depending on where it is,
right.
you know? So I'm
You have to
thinking,
bring water in because these things be soaked and soaked and soaked.
right, and I'm thinking like up near, like AR2 off of Haydenville Road, up where I live,
Sure.
there's no fire hydrant up
Farther
there.
out.
Yeah, exactly, West Whately, there's no fire hydrants. So that to me is a potential concern, whereas I think most of the commercial, industrial is along Route 5. There are more resources, the access is easier.
It's usually on town water.
Yep,
So let me see if I understand. Let me just ask the clarifying question.
sure.
Is your comment or concern specifically regarding the tier 1 allowance by special permit in AR2?
Yes.
So that your concern, or you might
My
prefer to see that as a no in
Yes.
AR1.
I think that in the case of an emergency situation, this type of facility, even the tier 1 within AR2 is potentially a disaster. I mean, this is all kind of a disaster waiting to happen, but I think it would be especially impactful in that area where there are fewer resources. It's harder to get into some of those areas. The topography, I mean, I know they're gonna have a road and everything up there, but it just is gonna create, I think, potential for a larger problem in an emergency versus an area right along Route 5 or along 91 where emergency vehicles can get in, more emergency vehicles can get in, there's not gonna be a bottleneck.
So let's for tonight note that concern with respect to tier 1 allowed by special permit in AR2. Because there's other language in the bylaw that
Okay.
relates to availability of water, and I forget.
Stuff there was.
Yeah, there's some, so let's. And Patty, you're also taking care to like keep track of the questions, concerns that we have about this, right?
Didn't Westfield just have an issue
Oh,
with this?
When Lauren came in, I stopped writing down, but I
It's okay, I
can
can,
keep.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Even my thoughts, I.
so, and sort of, I think we have a general concern that we want to make sure we understand the bylaw provisions with respect to availability of water for fire suppression.
Right.
'Cause I remember
And that's one of the things that I was gonna ask is, can we limit it to town water available zones? But, you know, we'll get to that.
The-
Go ahead.
I wouldn't even wanna pull out of the word wells.
Right,
That would be detrimental to the entire town to pull out of town water wells.
Right.
Because it's my understanding of the lithium battery fire, you just soak it, soak it, soak it, soak it, soak it.
yeah.
So we'd almost have to be pulling water either out of the river
Or
and bringing it in on a truck.
Right.
Regardless.
You know, honestly, the best way to put out an electrical fire is with PFAS, frankly. You know, and that's, you
is
know.
great. That's what we want on our agricultural.
I'm concerned about, I don't understand how AR2 would even work. Like, I'll pick on Patty for a minute. Say Patty, the back portion of her property is an AR2.
Yeah.
She's gonna put a commercial battery storage in the back of her yard. Now.
Darn it, JD, you said you wouldn't tell.
Right. Well,
Now it's a
think
mixed
about,
use. How is it even possible?
well, think about the solar facility on Christian across from Sarah. That's in AR2.
But that's not battery storage.
Leased by the landowner, and so the AR2, so that would be a viable scenario.
How do they put commercial and residential zone?
Now they don't,
It's
so,
in the solar bylaw.
yeah, that's in the solar bylaw.
It's allowed in the
It
residential.
is,
It's
it is allowed in AR, it's actually allowed, solar is allowed in all districts by special permit.
Great.
All right, so, but it's, Doesn't have to be the same. Okay, so, so as a general note, we just want, as we go through this, pay particular attention to
This is this could be a mixed use though.
what could be a mixed use.
So if you have a residence in the front, an AR1, and you want to turn your 100 acres behind your house into a solar field, that's a mixed use.
Solar field, but not with battery.
Battery storage, right.
Mixed use.
Yeah,
Now it's a commercial enterprise, it's not a home-based business.
Which,
yeah, but that would be okay.
not according to this. Unless if it's in commercial industrial, you need a special permit.
Well, I mean, I think,
Or if it's in ag,
Well,
right now.
well, why couldn't, as far as I know, a landowner who has enough property, could subdivide and lease the portion, the AR2 portion. What's wrong with that? I don't see that there's any problem with that.
It really depends if it's over the aquifer and with the access.
Well, there's another, again, there are other issues about access, things like that, but I guess I'm thinking about, say, along River Road, some piece of property and they wanna have, or even like Fairview Farm, right over here, right? You know, they have the farm up front and they have solar way in the back. So I think that's totally.
Yeah, but a solar field is different than battery storage.
Yes,
Yes.
And
So this is
so I don't
standalone.
think we're, you know, I put a solar field in my backyard. But I wouldn't put battery storage in my backyard.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
I think
that's why the size doesn't matter, right? You can have residential class, like I have battery storage in my basement, but it's a residential size and it's a
right,
residential.
yeah, no, we're talking commercial size.
Right,
We're talking
right.
a commercial building that's attached to a solar field, I'm assuming. And, you know, I think that, I think they're two different things. I know they're two different things. If I decide to put a solar field in my backyard, if I decide to put solar on my house and put a battery in my garage, that is far different than a solar field with a 1 acre battery storage. So I think we're kind of mixing apples and oranges here. At least that's what I'm feeling.
Well, I think I don't think there's any issues here, you know, again, we have this arbitrary line in the ag residential zone where 400 feet back is AR2 and different rules apply and that can work just fine. You can have your principal dwelling, your residence in AR1, and then you could potentially get a special permit for commercial battery storage in AR2 per this table of use.
Right.
But again, you can't take the table of use regulations, you know, because things have to comply to all the other aspects of the
True.
bylaw in order to get a special permit.
I just wonder if it is almost going to be impossible to get the special permit in AR2 because of the need to comply with all of the other limiting factors that are described in this bylaw. Is it a moot point to have this by special permit in AR2? Would it be more straightforward and really overall more representative of the requirement to just say it's not allowed in AR2 because the circumstances in which an AR2 property are going to also comply with all of the other requirements may be so rare or impossible that it's at that point more straightforward to just say no.
It may be.
And I don't know if that's,
Right.
you know what I mean? I don't know if that's true or not, but that's something I would be curious.
So I think we should keep that in mind.
Yes.
I think in general, we have to be cognizant of the fact that if we are doing surreptitious bans through complexity of zoning, we're likely to run afoul of the Attorney General's
Sure.
office, right? So, to the extent that we severely restrict siting of such facilities in our town, again, whenever we get to the Attorney General could be struck down at that level as being overly unreasonably restricted. So we're trying to strike a balance here.
Right, I understand that, but I think sometimes, I don't know, I think that sometimes the table is, and this is in other bylaws as well, not just like even in this situation alone. But I think the table can sometimes be like misrepresenting how possible this actually
Right.
is based on everything else,
That's-
you know what I mean?
I know it's clear.
If
And
there's
is
no,
right.
if there's no way that AR2 can actually fulfill the requirements of this law, why are we saying special permit?
Well, I don't know that that's true. I mean, I really don't know that's true because, again, there could be a property where there's essentially no principal dwelling or residential use in the AR1 section, and they allow to use that for a driveway or an access road to reach the AR2 portion, which is where the battery storage is. I think there are scenarios in which this could work.
Okay. If there are scenarios, then we look at them individually, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just, if the amount of water that is required to, put out a fire, is available, then, if I want to put a, battery storage system in my backyard, of course, JD's going to argue with me, but,
The river anyways.
NIMBY, not in my yard.
yeah, I mean, but I've got the Mill River on one side and I've got hydrants on the other. I don't know. It seems to me like Laura said that we're kind of splitting hairs at this point, that if there isn't any place that an AR2 is going to pass this, then maybe we just say no. But I understand what you're saying, Brant, that we've got to get this through the state and
Well,
if doing it through special permit, there may be some place that they're able to do it. So.
All right, so I'm going to propose that we move on and look at the other, really get into the bylaw itself and stay aware that we're concerned about in particular access to resources for firefighting. So the definition, I think the definition of a battery energy storage system should be, I don't have any questions about it. I mean, that this is actually coming from, we have this definition from a known source, National Renewable Energy Lab. So it's right. Yeah.
Yes, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I don't think we need to.
Right. No, I agree.
And it's important to understand that these battery storage can either be in a standalone mode or, and increasingly, I think we're going to see as new solar fields try to get deployed, there are increasing requirements that some new solar fields include battery storage. And we have to bear in mind that we will at some point we will at some point need to review and revise our solar electric generating facility bylaw, which has some weak provisions incorporated in it related to battery storage. But this bylaw that we're reviewing now deals with standalone battery storage systems, not battery storage as part of a solar array. All right. So I think the purpose, I didn't have any concerns about the purpose. And regarding applicability, there's a bunch of discussion in the committee, the Energy System Storage Systems Committee, around like capacity limits and thresholds and things like that. And there was a consensus around, well, we basically agreed that residential battery storage, like the one I have, which is a 12 kilowatt hour system, for example, and these can go, residential systems can go maybe even in 20, 25, that sort of thing. That we shouldn't be getting in the way of that. In fact, the building inspectors already said that these things are allowed per state code anyway, so. And we didn't want to prevent commercial businesses from having their own battery storage, again, as backup for their own businesses, right? But versus the use we're concerned about here is storage for resale to the grid, collecting off the grid, selling back to the grid. And it seemed like and I think this ended up coming in from Medway, was that 70 kilowatt hours was going to be the lower threshold where this bylaw would start to play a role. And then once you hit the 70 kilowatt hour storage capacity, then we break that down into two different tiers. So the lower tier was up to 600 kilowatt hours in this draft, and with a size limit under 2 acres. And this number, so I want to deal with it tonight.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I want to bring to the site and dimension requirements.
Yeah.
There's nowhere in our commercial, industrial, or industrial zoning districts that are 100 feet above the floodplain. So it's not even allowed.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
A battery electric storage system is not permitted in the aquifer protection district. It must be located at least 100 feet above the floodplain. That's elevation is above. Floodplain is a kind of, we are a flat town until we get West Whately.
Yeah,
All of our commercial industrial land is in East Whately.
I think this is where I think,
Which is all the part of town that.
I think this part of the bylaw language needs to be revised.
But and then it also says a minimum of 750 feet away from any water supply or septic system, any well or water system.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you're
Does that
750.
include personal wells, JD?
Yes, yeah, and septics, so that effectively eliminates a lot of the town.
Like most of it.
You're out of the floodplain, you're in West Whately or Haydenville Road area, if you're up there, everybody's got a well in the septic system, because there's no town water and no town sewer.
So let's just address this point about floodplain, because I think that language is questionable.
100 feet above the floodplain.
Yeah, I know what it says, but remember, that's a draft. It's over to us to look at and revise.
Where did they come
But look,
from?
well, I think that was just,
Did some of it come from state?
it just came from the author of the draft bylaw. And I just want to point out, because am I sharing this on my screen? Because I want to show you guys the floodplain map. To show you the current floodplain map. Which I think is stop the share. Let me share this with you. I'll adjust that. Kind of make that big. So what I'm sharing with you is the current flood zone map that's derived from FEMA.
It's from 1970.
Is this, I was gonna say, because they're
Yeah.
updating this, right?
Yes, but
Okay,
it's not, we don't have a new
we
map.
don't have it yet, yes,
Right? It's-
correct,
And
I agree.
we
I'll
don't,
have to go by
and
this.
given
Yes.
what's going on at the federal level with FEMA, who knows? There will
What
ever be
FEMA?
an update or whether, how this, but I'm not even gonna go there. But what I want to point out is that the dark blue areas are those are called the FEMA flood zones, the regulatory floodway. That's the 100-year flood
I was
zone.
gonna say, it's a 100-year storm. And it's, yeah. And because we are so regulated along the Connecticut River due to dams, it's much smaller than it should be, given the fact that we've got climate change and the 100-year storm now comes every like 2 or 3 years.
But that point's well taken. However, it's only the blue zones, the FEMA flood zones that I believe were intended to be what the draft bylaw is referring to. That you couldn't put battery storage in those zones, not in any place that could flood.
No, it says
100.
located at least 100 feet above. Above means elevation. Elevation. So, the Mill River, that's the Mill River Basin right there. You need to be 100 feet above that before you can possibly do it. So anything from that Mill River to the Connecticut River is absolutely out because there's no.
For this language. So now the question is, so I think the language is wrong in the draft bylaw.
Okay.
Because I think if we say, leave something like that in and basically effectively exclude all of Whately with that one sentence alone, let's suppose we made that 250 feet above the bylaw, above the flood.
You can put them on sugar.
Then you could basically say nothing,
It's not Whately.
yeah, and this is gonna be thrown right out. So, and the other risk we run two risks with how we do this bylaw. One is that there will be an obvious issue that the Attorney General says, this is unreasonably restrictive, whatever the town votes, we're throwing it out. The other risk we run is that we've, let's say inadvertently, in our bylaw language, put in something that basically makes it all but impossible for any battery storage to go in Whately. Then a developer comes and basically sues to say, this is ridiculous, this is unreasonably restrictive, and this gets taken out of the town's control. Like it happened I think this is what the issue was in Medfield. Or, a developer came in and basically got a judgment, a judge, to say that the development could move ahead because the town zoning was unreasonably restrictive.
Can I be the skunk at the lawn party?
Sure.
Okay. It seems to me, having read this and looking at especially this map and their conversations here, that there really are very, very few places in Whately that could accommodate a battery storage. Given that, does it really matter? Well, so we're looking at the AR2 stuff. Everyone at West Whately is on a public well or on the secondary well system, and it just seems to me that just looking at this kind of in the larger scheme of things, there are very few places in Whately that something like this could exist. And maybe we should say that everything should, well, looking at that that table that you had on here before, yeah, special permit. You you check off if you make all the checks, then we'll look at it. But it seems to me that there are so few places that this even has the ability to be thought of. You know, maybe we're spinning our wheels at this point.
So I think, Patty, the reality is what you're expressing may be more a matter of personal opinion that could be arguable or contestable. And it may be, like, it could be that the citizens of Whately feel there's no place in Whately that these can go, so we're just gonna ban them.
No,
The state will not allow.
No, wait a minute, Brant. What I'm suggesting is that we go ahead and do the special permits for certain locations, because there may be places in Whately where this is capable to be permitted.
Yeah.
So,
Patty, is your argument that then we'd be waiving or modifying siting and dimensional requirements based on the site proposing?
say that again, please.
Are you saying that we would adjust the siting and the dimensional requirements based on the application where they want to put it?
Yes.
You can't do that.
That's what we're talking about.
So the ZBA, it can't work by a variance process. The ZBA will only issue special permits based on conformance to the zoning. And then they take other things into account. This might be a good opportunity to ask the ZBA, like, under what conditions would they issue some special permit?
And I want to make it clear for the minutes, Laura, that I am not against this whole thing. I'm not. I really am not. I'm just saying that given the restrictions within the bylaw, access to water, being the big one, and over town water supplies, wells, septic, the whole 9 yards. I think that if we move things through the way it's written, we're going to be fine, and we can individually look at each permit and decide whether or not it meets the regulations. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying, I'm really not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying that give us the opportunity to look at it.
Did these dimensional requirements, did they come from the state?
No,
Did they come from other communities?
the origin, they were really two primary models the committee drew from in drafting this bylaw.
Like, so for example, based on what we have here, this proposed draft,
Yeah.
there's no where immediately we can put this. Would say like the town of Hatfield, be like, you know what, we're gonna create it, so we're gonna take that 100-foot elevation, make it 25 feet. Or we're gonna change the distance from the wells, smaller. But what if other towns do, like, so we're consistent, like with neighboring communities, are they more restrictive, less restrictive to?
I've asked a similar question. There are not that many communities that have battery energy storage bylaws. Right?
So do we have to make it less restrictive so it's possible for it to happen?
We certainly
have to have it in place.
We have to have it in place. We have to be reasonable in our regulations.
So we could just throw out the elevation issue.
We could throw out the elevation issue. Absolutely. We get to decide what we're comfortable with and what's reasonable.
But we have to have something on the books.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. So I wanted to just take another look at these thresholds, because the tier one, remember tier one was supposed to be smaller, lower risk systems. But there was this whole issue, I think it saved the article, but I think it was in Bedfield, where it was only a 200 a 200 kilowatt hour system, I think, or something that was still what this would call a tier one system, but it was big, you know, it was, and there were a lot of concerns about the risks of that. So I just wanna make a note not to do this tonight, but make sure we're comfortable with the idea that what the right thresholds are for tier one and tier two.
Well, is that tier one, tier two threshold, does that come from someplace else?
So there is this National Fire Prevention Association, NFPA. There's standards related to battery storage.
Okay, yeah,
And there are tables that the person who drafted this bylaw
yes,
referred to.
okay,
And I had started to go back and look at those tables, and I then found myself having questions, that thinking that the tables that were used to set these thresholds were meant for different purposes in the NFPA
interesting.
standard. So I wanna revisit.
So I don't want to insult anyone who was part of the
Right.
committee who put this together.
Right.
But I also have some questions that may not be answered within this document that I didn't really think about until we've been sitting here discussing. But some of the concerns about septic systems, private wells, public wells,
Right.
all of that, and the setbacks from the river, that information I would think is out there somewhere. And ultimately, it's a public health issue and an environmental issue that really, I think that those setbacks need to be probably dictated to us from the state at some point, right? And the state has not put that information out yet, is my understanding.
So there is no model bylaw from the
Okay.
state with respect to any of these
Sure.
issues. And setbacks and so forth in zoning are very, very bespoke per community and without necessarily following state guidelines.
Right.
Like, for example, we have in our solar generation bylaw, we have a setback of like 100 feet from property lines.
Mhm.
But I've looked at other communities and I've seen setbacks that are like 25 feet,
Sure.
50 feet.
And that, I mean, I think most of the setbacks that we deal with in our day-to-day or whatever month-to-month actions as members of the planning board are not necessarily things that are going to always affect public health. It's more like something that, okay, we're trying to keep the peace in the community, right? We
Right.
don't want to piss off the neighbor, essentially. This is very different, in my opinion. I feel like this is really a public health concern. I certainly don't have the expertise to say how is 100 feet far enough from somebody's drinking water supply for this type of battery storage. I don't want to end up with a, Aaron Brockovich situation on our hands in 20 years because we don't have maybe the resources to have that information. It doesn't exist yet. And I understand we have to come up with something in order to protect ourselves essentially, but I feel like we maybe need, I don't know, some additional like resources or just sources of where is this information?
Yeah.
How do we know? Are we doing the right thing for the community? Are we doing enough? Are we doing too much? Maybe it's too restrictive. Maybe I don't need to be concerned about my drinking water, but I feel like I should. So I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but
Well,
now I'm getting
Yeah.
very out of my comfort zone.
yeah, no, I do understand. So I do want to remind everyone that this draft is not crafted out of thin air.
Right.
We did use as a primary source of battery energy storage bylaw from a town where they hired consultants and they did an extensive amount of research, and we can have access to those
Okay.
that documentation. And so there was a certain level of trust that the original bylaw was rational. It passed the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
So it was for that particular community, considered to be sufficient and adequate and adequately researched. I don't feel we can or should start a project from a blank slate, like we have to research all of, so, or that's the question before us.
We don't have the resources.
Yeah, we don't
Right.
have.
Can I ask a question?
I'll get to you 1 second.
Okay.
Patty. We have to decide at how much trust we're willing to place, and I can get briefing materials and other documents that were presented to the town of Medfield as part of their work and from their consultants.
Okay.
But I think what ended up happening in our local storage study committee is that we surveyed the landscape of towns that were doing this. We decided that Medfield had done the, spent the money,
Right.
done the due diligence, and that we didn't have to second guess most of it.
Okay,
That we could take it and then where there were areas where we thought we needed to tweak it to make it fit Whately better, we would do that.
okay,
And so I think we have decided, no, we can't do that. We
right,
wanna start afresh. So, Patty,
yeah, no,
My
yes, please.
question was, okay, so we agree on, let's just say that we all agree on the format that it's in right now. If we find that it isn't working, can we change it in the future?
oh, absolutely, we can change
Okay.
any bylaw in the future, and I think it's worth keeping in mind that the perfect is the enemy of the good enough here.
I mean,
Exactly.
something to come before the town,
Yes,
and we're gonna have to present it
Right,
and sell it to them.
Yes.
And sell it to.
I
them.
just think it would be helpful to have some of that background information of like regulations or whatever of,
Right.
hey, we said it needs
For our
to be.
presentation.
Yes, it needs to be this far from your well because that's the, chemical leakage can go this deep or what, I don't know all the terminology, but I think that's information that as a citizen, I'm concerned about. And I also think other people would have similar concerns. Same thing with,
This is probably something we'd have a public meeting for
Yeah.
beforehand, to have people come to give us
okay,
additional feedback on what their concerns
Yes.
are before coming.
Okay.
It makes town meeting go better.
yes, well, and I think that would be good. And frankly, like, I've been on the board for a year and this is the first bylaw that I've had like passion about. Most of the time, it's just like, sure, it's fine. But this one is like, has real potential to affect, could have long lasting effects, could affect our children, could affect, grandchildren, everybody in town. It's not a marijuana facility. It's,
right, yeah. All right, so we're gonna sort of keep moving. What are we doing on 1 versus 7? Another on this. I do think that this language, this sentence in the draft about placement of tier 1 systems really doesn't belong there. And that restriction about related to the Aquifer Protection District or the floodplain belongs elsewhere because it applies both to tier 1 and tier 2 systems. The sentence that I've highlighted, they are allowed with a special permit. First of all, it's unnecessary language because it's right there in the table of use regulations. But we have to address I think there was consensus that wherever these systems go, they stay out of any of zones 1, 2, and 3 of the Aquifer Protection District. And they stay out of the regulatory floodplain. And I think the floodplain, that was the intent. Not, and I think the language about height or
I must say, just knowing what a precious resource the Connecticut is and how far we've come in the last 50 years to make it not a cesspool.
yeah,
I'm not adverse to having a certain amount of space above the floodplain. That's with the nurse is not, but that project, that was one of my concerns about that we were not allowed to say, the runoff
Right.
and that's right on the river.
Yeah,
And they're pulling on the river, but I understand it's agriculture, that wasn't our purview,
right.
but we need to protect that river.
Interesting. Okay, so we'll have a note about, so this is really.
And all the watershed that goes into
Right,
it.
and there's also
It's
a,
not just,
Yeah,
right, there are, like the scenic river and whatever, water byway protections are separate. There's probably 100-foot setback anyways from the river, because it's a wetland, or any wetlands, you're gonna have 100-foot setback for any type of construction, even just building a house.
yeah,
So I think,
They're 200 feet from, waterproof protection act.
yeah, yes, the water, yes,
yes.
that's what I was.
so what you're saying is you're feeling like we do wanna have some setback beyond the regulatory floodplain, the regulatory floodway, which is smaller than, some
I do,
height
I
above
just,
the floodplain.
yeah, I mean.
We're talking about runoff from something from a fictional thing. It's elevation what matters, it's not really distance, it's elevation.
Right, if that's all flat, but it's gotta go with that amount of water,
It's gotta go somewhere.
yeah.
Whether it's 100 feet or 1,000 feet, if the flame of land is level, it doesn't matter.
I mean, and how are you filtering, I mean, I have a lot of ignorance too, but all that water, what's in it from putting out a potential fire that the likelihood is low, I understand that. But if one of those fires happens, it's catastrophic.
And how concerned do we then have to be about potentially the surrounding farmland, which is huge in our town? A lot of it's under state APR protection, which could be another layer to all of this. And what is the long-term, consequences for that soil? Okay, so now this water that was used to put out the fire has leached into the soil. Now there's PFAS all over the soil. Does that put that farm out of business? What if it's a certified organic farm? There's a handful of those in town, and now we put that person out of business. So I think there's just a lot of layers to this.
Yes. All right, so we have to sort of walk through this to see whether and to what degree we have reasonable regulations in place.
We do need to put something in, but I more than just the flood plain.
And I think we need a clearer definition than the floodplain.
Well, I think we have to use that now.
Yeah. Well, I think we can look at, after review, the new floodplain overlay district bylaw and the various definitions.
I
Say
think,
like, we could say there could be certain zones where these systems are excluded. All right. So we're gonna move into part C on general.
Isn't that already specified within the regulation though? That there are certain zones where it is excluded?
I'm sorry, what are you asking about? Is
Well,
it
no,
already?
you were talking about the zones where this would be excluded. Isn't that
Yeah,
already specified?
so I think what I was trying to say is that currently in this draft bylaw that we're studying, there's this 3 words, or the floodplain. And I think the floodplain is used here is not clearly defined what that is.
yes,
Is it the one, if that really means, as I thought it did, the 1% flood zone, that's the FEMA regulated floodway, which has specific terminology in our new floodplain overlay district. If, however, we really want to say something more expansive than the 1% or the 100-year flood zone, then I think we need to find the right terms in our floodplain overlay district. Because I'm not even convinced I understand something of the form 100 feet above the floodplain. Like, I don't know what that means.
Right, how do you quantify what that is either? And I think
Okay.
honestly, this is gonna be a big bear to tackle, right? I don't know that we're gonna get anything accomplished on it tonight. That's
Yeah.
my personal feeling. I think we're all coming at it with different interests in mind,
Right.
different concerns, but ultimately we do need to just get something done. I
Right.
propose, what if we take additional time to read this over, maybe look at, make a list of each of our own concerns, do a little research on our own, come prepared with background on our concerns and potential resolutions for that at the next meeting, because I think we're gonna be beating a dead horse
Are we
tonight.
going for special town meeting?
Well, I don't know that we are. I mean, I know that, so we have to be comfortable with a bylaw. Before anything can get to a town meeting at all, special or otherwise, we have to be comfortable enough with a draft of a bylaw that we can take it to a public hearing.
We really need a public hearing.
Right, but if we do a public hearing and then make major revisions, then we have to do another public hearing, right?
Yeah.
I know that that the committee that produced this feels the matter is of such urgency that they would, I think, put words in their mouth, they would urge the planning board to move with all deliberate speed and get something on the books ASAP.
What is the consequences of public meeting where there's the enormous public outcry that they absolutely do not want this in town?
We are their voice. We would amend what we have.
If the people say,
Oh,
we
yeah.
don't want this,
Yes.
this is it, and we're saying, well, the state's saying that we have to let them do it.
We would, right, try to find a place where it can. I mean, that's what we're doing. And then hopefully we can present it as and have said, the committee has done a whole lot of homework, Medway has done more that we're basing it on. So I mean, coming at it, and if the public is really, we can say, okay, we're gonna hire some more experts, we're gonna do this, I mean,
Yeah,
but we are their voice.
when we go to town meeting, usually they understand it. This is contentious. I
Right,
mean, you get two passionate speakers at town meeting, this gets sabotaged.
Well, certainly, well, here's the thing, again, one argument we have is that if we can relatively expeditiously come up with a set of regulations that we are, maybe not loving to death,
Yeah.
but because understand that in the absence of any regulation, any developer can come in and put one of these things anywhere, all right? We need something in place that will get past the Attorney General's office. And then,
But our topography doesn't make that work.
well,
but they don't know that,
Because the Attorney General can't change our topography.
so they
so,
don't know it in Boston.
yeah.
Can
So,
I try to
again,
sum up
I'm
something?
encouraging a strategy here of subterfuge, of building in enough complexity or measurements that make it effectively impossible, because then I think we open the town up to lawsuits. I get it. All right.
No,
So I
exactly.
Best faith effort here, but maybe we do have to agree that we're gonna have a lot of concerns with this draft. And we're not gonna be able to, in order to resolve them to our ultimate satisfaction, it's gonna take longer than we kind of have for now, that we may just have to say, what are the things we must fix so we can feel that this is good enough, do a public hearing, and get approved at a special town meeting. And then we have some more luxury to go back and make additional tweaks, maybe for next year's annual town meeting. And I think that's what, in a sense, is our argument in the face of outcry. If people are like, we hate this, we don't want these anywhere, we can say, well, if you vote this down, then we will have nothing on the books until such time as we can have something on the books. And now we're way more vulnerable.
So it's either having rules or having no rules.
It's basically having rules that you feel are inadequate versus no rules.
Right.
That's the argument I'm gonna make.
Okay, all right, and that's where we all, our heads need to be on this. I mean, I've been coming into it with like, what are the things that we really feel we urgently need to fix before a public hearing? And I do feel like this language, I think, I have some questions about the thresholds, whether 70 kilowatt hours is too, I don't know that that's too low, but I do think that 600 kilowatt hours of the dividing line might be too high.
But can we, Medfield what's the population of Medfield compared
It's
to the
like
population?
24,000,
So,
and they have a paid planner on staff.
but I'm just saying, and I know this is more about supplying backup for the entire state.
Yes,
But why can't we say, this is Whately, we have 1,800 people, we need to size this more for 1,800 people instead of 25,000, whatever.
Limit size.
So that's why limit our size based on our population, not on our open land, because our open land for Whately is more important for forestry and agriculture
Good point.
versus population.
it makes sense. I will point out that technology is a
sense.
moving target, you
Yes.
well know. And
This is
what
the whole state.
and energy densities are increasing. So you could put 600 kilowatt hours in a much smaller space, in a year or 5 years.
But we also have to transport it to, and you lose energy as
Right.
the longer you transport it, the more you lose. So put it on all commercial buildings out east.
Yeah. Well, so we have to, we cannot we cannot overtly or inadvertently ban it from our town. We have to get something in.
So I'm just saying maybe size down
Yeah.
slightly.
So we may have to, I want to take another look at those size limits, but I'll recheck them against Medfield.
It's not anti per se, but Whately's water is precious because how many other, we have 2 to 3 other towns that we have given up our water resources to. So,
I've lived through not having water because it's contaminated. We had to check out the National Bureau of Water Health.
Right.
I still have my well in my front yard. Not the drink out of that.
Couldn't they handle put a battery electric storage system in their factory on Christian Lane and just put a huge solar in the roof and put it on site?
Cruise factory.
Yeah.
Oh,
I hate to put it this way. Are we beating a dead horse?
Yeah. So for running their plant.
well, or what if they left that facility? Why couldn't that be converted into big battery storage?
Somebody said put them on the roof of a building. Is that feasible?
Oh, well, you probably wouldn't want to do
My
that.
personal opinion is in Boston, they should have passed a rule that every new commercial building must have enough solar or enough renewable energy to support their resources, but that's my own personal.
But I think with battery storage, I don't know that I want something that has these kinds of fire hazards on a roof.
The 91.
So it's a different use.
Oh, I'm just talking solar.
No, I understand that. If they're gonna try to, if they put a big array, they can on the roof to collect this, could they put I'm picking on that, whatever, could they put a battery electric storage system right there to store it, for just supplement running their factory,
They absolutely
Yeah.
could if they currently comply with either, well, right now, we don't have anything, they could. They could put a commercial battery storage there, and then it would be, how would it fit with the
It's a
spot?
pre-existing building, it's not a brand new construction, it's your modifying.
All right, we may have to follow through on Laura's suggestion that we've had our really serious conversation about this. And we need to do some work offline between now and our next meeting, which will be joint with the zoning board of appeals. And see what questions and concerns they have. But I think we keep in mind that we should be looking at this through the lens of what can we live with in the short term? Are there glaring holes in this? Because the alternative is nothing.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Pat.
I think that honestly, we're going round and round about things that we don't have to go round and round about. What we need to do is come up with a proposal, regardless of what our personal opinions are, to be honest with you, because ultimately, whether or not, I mean, I'm not going to put a battery storage in my backyard. No one is. The point is we have to come up with reasonable accommodations for people that might want to put a commercial battery storage wherever it is, and do it in such a way that, whether it's through special permit, and I think it should be through special permits, that we can look at it and decide, does it meet the parameters of whatever it is that we've decided to put forth. And whether, again, I'm not putting battery storage in my backyard. I think that we've sorry, Laura, but I think we've beaten this horse to death, frankly. John just laughed at me. And, you know, it's, you know, we're going around about things that ultimately come back to personal opinion as opposed to what we need, which is right for the town. So let's keep that in mind moving forward. And looking at what has been put forward in the proposal, I have to look at it a little bit more closely, but I think that what we've got there with a couple of tweaks will work. Nobody's going to like it, and we have to accept that. But like I said, Brant, regardless of whether or not they like it, if we don't put something forward, then we're opening ourselves up to a whole bunch of crap. So I think personally, for me, like I said, we've beaten this horse to death. Or we're beating a dead horse. Sorry, Laura. And I think that we should just look at it a little bit more closely and try to come to a conclusion at our next meeting.
I think that's an appropriate goal. So let's close on that. I'll also just point out though that the real use case is not like you or I deciding we want to put one of these big things in our backyard. The use case is a developer buying a big plot of land, and
It could definitely be like solar in some, paying a individual who has the back lot.
yeah. But all the examples that I've seen where these things are being proposed are significant developers that have bought parcels of land in town, and that's what they're doing. I think that's okay. All right, so I don't think we're going to talk tonight about bylaw amendments related to mobile and manufactured homes. Is there any news on that front? Like,
Patty didn't have time to get together, but I did a little research and I have to look at my phone because I got
okay.
We should get together in the next week or so.
Yes. I did. So I went to mass.gov. I pulled the Mass General Law to get the definitions of kind of the different classes of like RV, trailer,
Good.
agricultural trailer, all of those different things. So I do think that if we refer to the Mass General Law and their definitions, it is pretty clear cut on what is what, if that makes sense. I have all the definitions here. I'm sure you guys don't necessarily need me to read them out loud to you, but basically a motor vehicle, so an RV would be considered a motor vehicle, but not every motor vehicle is an RV, of course.
And there's a definition of recreational vehicle built into the floodplain bylaw. The new one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. And then for trailer, it's anything, any vehicle or object on wheels having no motive power on its own, but which is drawn by or used in combination with motor vehicle should not include, pole dolly or who knows what it is. Or a pair of wheels commonly used to implement for other purposes. Blah, blah. Farm machinery are, not considered in this definition, when they're used in connection with the operation of a farm. Anyway, I looked into it a little bit, but Patty and I probably need to sit down and look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Send me the information if you will.
I will.
I'm fully
Central.
tired, so.
I'll email it to you.
the central challenge is to look at the existing bylaw that pertains to mobile homes and recreational vehicles and decide how to revise it, potentially adding or changing definitions as necessary. Okay, all right. Are there any other updates on planning board project? I spoke before the meeting with you, Sarah, regarding the
Yep,
research
I'm going
on
to work
planning
on
board fees.
looking at our fees, talking, I need to talk to our town officials about maybe a direct rate, just how much time they think. And our town clerk, how much time, and maybe our assessors, how much time they put in kind of the overhead time.
Great, great. Okay,
Do we have a new clerk coming? Do they hire someone else?
and then what?
A new planning board clerk?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
What I want to do is approval of minutes, which would be the next item on our agenda. So so I circulated minutes of our March 26th meeting. I didn't hear any I can share it, but I didn't hear any comments or feedback. As usual, Laura did an amazing, like 95%, and then I tweaked it a little bit. Other than that, this was the one where we had Megan Rhodes from FERCog. So if we're good with this, somebody, one of you kind folks.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay, a motion to approve the minutes of March 26th has been made.
I will second it.
And that motion has been seconded by Sarah. So we'll do our roll call vote, starting with you, Patty, on the call.
No, I mean, yes.
That would be like in Congress. Sarah,
Yes,
I'll vote yes. JD?
Yes.
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 Okay, unanimous approval of minutes. Thank you. I will see that they get posted. Okay, so now we're into topics not reasonably anticipated. So, I just got a draft of the warrant articles for annual town meeting on June 3rd. And I noted a couple of little glitches that I've informed Pete about. I'll circulate that to all of you, so see it. Pete's asked me to write the 2 brief notes, explanatory notes on the 2 zoning articles that are on the warrant. So, why don't you, in fact, just since.
Can I ask a silly question?
Yes,
Are we required to attend town meeting other than being a resident?
you are never required, you mean as a member of the planning board?
Correct.
No,
I
you're
mean,
not.
because finance committee, when I was on there for, a hot minute, we were. So I'm just curious as to whether or not we as planning board members need to be there.
You do not need to be there. I think at least the chair is required or expected to be there. So I'll be there. And anyone who wants company is welcome. I actually will be there because I have to read the motions that relate to zoning, and I'll probably make some statements, brief explanations about them, since people seem to like that.
Okay. A simple yes or no would suffice.
Okay. So that was about upcoming town meeting on June 3rd. So I let you know that I did speak to, I guess I can share the name on this public meeting. Mike Mahar, we had a good conversation. He's interested in taking Sarah's seat when her time here with us is up at the end of June. I think he seemed like a reasonable candidate. I talked about the time commitments, need to work, do some other things, and she felt like, just like, say, all of us, there are certain times of the year where it may be harder, but seemed to be up to the task. So this is your chance. If anyone has any questions or concerns, let me know. Otherwise, what I would do is pass our recommendation. In fact, I think we should just vote to endorse. We've never really done that. We don't, obviously.
We don't always have as much opportunities as we have.
That's true.
On this one.
Yeah.
Usually it's like, hey, found somebody.
Yeah, well, this is sort of the case.
You hold a point of view that we might not always agree with, but it's important that we consider.
Good with
I
that.
like the fact that we've got another way west Whately individual, because right now 4 of the 5 of us are flatlanders.
Yeah.
So I like the idea. I really like the idea of having a West Whately individual.
Good. So then what I will do is, and I told Mike that this is what we would have this conversation, then I would pass on our recommendation to the town moderator, who is the appointing officer, and invite Mike to join us at our next public meeting.
Is the moderator out of the country?
No,
I
he was
just
here.
saw him.
He was just out all the time.
Does he usually go away from the summer and stuff?
They often go on sabbatical
Yeah,
or
our town has.
summer. I saw them both in person.
Okay.
I don't know that he can do what he does from anywhere in terms of appointing, that sort of thing.
Right, he
But
sends
Mike-
the letter and they have to come in and get signed by, town clerk, I believe, signs off on that piece.
Okay. And the only other item is that, I was telling Sarah this, we still do not have a clerk for planning and zoning. The most recent candidate, who, as I said, we offered it to one, he then ended up having to say no, and then we had interviewed 2 that we thought were both good, and then we went to number 2, and she accepted, but then before she even could be sworn in, she said no, she had some personal thing. So we're back to square one, and I think he's reposted the job description, and he's also just seeing if there's anyone in any existing town staff that might be willing to do something with this. And it's more for, the ZBA seems to have more about a need than but yeah, so tough situation. And I don't know that there was something else that I was thinking about, but it's slipped my mind at the moment. Anything else from anybody? We've agreed that what our next meeting date's going to be, May 29th, Thursday.
We're proposing that to ZBA, that
I'm
they'll
gonna
meet with
propose
us.
that as many of them as can join us that night will.
And we're still saying 5:30, right?
We are still saying 5:30.
So,
Okay.
I'm stalling for a moment to just make sure that the something that was flitting around in my head, now I remember. Thank you. Our community development administrator, Erica Roper.
Okay,
So they're gonna be posting that job.
And that is the person that.
Floodplain administrator. Yeah, like,
I don't.
not quite a year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I think she wanted something that was more of a part-time job and she's moving further away. Lately, so I mean, there are personal reasons for that, so. That's it. So now I would entertain a motion to adjourn, made by JD, seconded by Sarah, all in favor?
Hey, team.
And adjourn. All right, thank you
Bye.
all.
All right, guys.
See-
Talk to you soon.